Hi, Chris.
How you doing, Paul? All right?
Yeah, good, good. And I love the new intro, and I wasn't expecting that, but excellent.
Yeah. Well, it's a bit pacier, isn't it? And a bit of a sci-fi twist, hybrid alien
Yeah,
cryptid vibe going on.
it's
So another Tuesday comes round really quick again. I can't believe how fast it's coming round.
absolutely. But we've got a great guest tonight, so hopefully we'll absolutely nail this one. You know, our audience are going to love listening to what this guy's got to share. And before I forget, obviously we thank Lorraine. She's doing the moderating for us. Questions in capitals, please, for Lorraine. She's probably already put that in chat. And please bear with her. So when we get round to questions, she'll read them all in order. But I don't know if it's all like truth proof. Sometimes they're just zipping up and it's difficult at times. So remember, she will get to them. Before we bring our guest on, now let's just have a look who we've got in chat now, because we're going up for 50 people here, which is great. We've got Karen Behrman, Lee, Rivington Pike, Beast, Zero, Dawn, Simon Riley, Diane Farrell. Let's have a look. Sober Carper, Tom Waters, Ian Linney. Good to see you, Ian. Well, good to see all of you, but I was away, Linney, last night on Cliff Tops. Tonya Morrison, Dragonborn, and we've done Simon Riley, Jilly B. As fast as I say it, another one comes up because I'm going to stop. Alison, our moderator for Truth Proof, good to see you. We're going to stop and we'll do a bit more name shout later. And I think we should bring our guest on, Chris, unless there's all you want to cover for a minute. We're good to go?
No, I think Trey's going to be great tonight. We're going to get a pile of questions. I can see that now. So
absolutely.
Yeah, great. Yeah, looking forward to it.
Hello, Trey.
Hey, greetings from the U.S. How is everybody doing this evening for you, midday for me?
Well, it's a cold, wet night here in the little fishing town of Bridlington, but Trey, it's great to be speaking to you. So tonight, for those that don't know, and I think a lot of people will, we're talking to Trey Hudson, the chief principal researcher of the Meadow project, and a location not unlike Skinwalker Ranch, not unlike Bempton and a few other areas of ice strangers around the world. Also author of the Meadow project, and no doubt he'll tell us a bit about that afterwards. But Trey, welcome.
Well, hey, thanks for having me, guys. You know, I love talking to fellow researchers, you know, guys and gals that are actually in the trenches doing the work, as y'all are, which is fantastic because it reaffirms and kind of re-energizes me to hear, you know, folks out there doing very similar work. And also, this is an amazing story. This is, you know, the stuff that we've experienced is it's uncanny, it's interesting, and it's not my story. It's not the story of, you know, that belongs to my team. It belongs to the world. So any opportunity I get to share it, I'm more than happy to do so.
Well, we're delighted and absolutely feel honored that you're going to share a few hours of this incredible encounter, incredible experience, adventure that you're having out there. Sometimes a bit scary, sometimes exciting. So just give us an overview before we jump into this and start hitting you with a few questions.
Yeah, no problem. It's what we're looking at is a site, and here, as I'm sure in the UK and Great Britain, there are public lands, and this particular site is on public land, accessible by the public. And actually, we were doing sort of some Bigfoot kind of stuff. This area has a very rich history of cryptids, Bigfoot, stuff like that. And we stumbled across a meadow, you know, a large open field, if you will, you know. And it was just such a great place to research because it was so open. It had such a wide expanse of sky that you could watch while you were researching, that we decided to start really kind of drilling into that location because logistically it just made a lot of sense. And just the way these things happen sometimes, you know, was it accidental or was it fate? I don't know. But this turned out to be a geographical location that we have personally experienced UFOs, cryptids, missing time, disembodied voices, physically being touched, electronics failure, and something that we call the box or cube. And depending on your point of view, it could have been a portal, it could have been the remnants of a ship or something, but some sort of vortex that we actually captured on film, our team walking into and then coming back out. And the really neat thing is the way we found that was using thermal, FLIR camera, and they disappeared off our FLIR camera when they entered the threshold of this box or cube. So you look at that now, you start thinking, is there any other places in the world that kind of fit that, that description? And the one that comes to mind, at least here in the States, is the legendary Skinwalker Ranch, which was, so well researched by Robert Bigelow and his National Institute for Discovery Science, and then the fantastic books by Keller and George Knapp, that really deal into that. And of course, Ryan Skinner has a lot of books on Skinwalker Ranch too. So, there are a lot of parallels. And now that I'm kind of talking to people, all over the world, I'm finding that not only there are parallels between Skinwalker Ranch, and the Meadow, there's similarities to your location, that y'all
we see lots of similarities. I think
right.
you'll see them as well, Chris, with Bempton, don't you?
Yeah, it just sounded like a tick box, a list there that we all just ticking off this phenomena, and every now and then, like Trey said, a new one will appear. And because, as Trey said earlier to us off air, we were talking about the phenomena, and you just think you've got this thing figured out, and then a new phenomena will appear, and then you have to change your theory again. And the one thing about this stuff is that we do say that they are theories.
Yeah,
none of us in here have the answers. We don't proclaim to have the answers. There are those out there that do, but we certainly don't. And I think if you're seriously investigating these places and your boots on the ground, you would never proclaim to know the answers because it just doesn't work that way.
Yeah, it's silly. I tell people, if somebody comes up to you as far as this type of phenomenon, say, I have the answer. I know what's going on. Either A, they're a fool or they're lying, because they don't. They just don't know the answer. We have, like you said, we have some hypotheses and theories, but that in 5 cents will get you a cup of coffee. I don't even think 5 cents will get you a cup of coffee any day.
If somebody had worked it out, Trey, Chris, and everybody in chat, we wouldn't be sat here now covering these topics, and you wouldn't be doing radio shows and podcasts. I don't mean all week and every week, but you wouldn't be doing them on a regular basis, and neither would we. Everybody's craving for these answers, but some of them, some of us are trying a little bit harder, and full recommendation to you, Trey, for getting yourself out there and boots on the ground. It's absolutely amazing. I'd love to be out there with you.
Oh, yeah. Well, maybe one day we can make it happen.
Yeah.
It's something Chris alluded to, and which I think is very important, for everyone to hear, is, here we live in the 21st century. And, I'm seeing things that when I was a young man were science fiction. These things, cell phones are science fiction to me, because that's what the crew of the Enterprise carried, back in the 60s and 70s. And, we can access pretty much all the information in the world at the touch of our fingers. It's not like when I was in university and I had to go to a research library. I can look it up, right here from the comfort of my own home. And with all this information and all this data and all of these answers, isn't it absolutely wonderful that there are still mysteries out there?
Yeah.
Don't you find that exciting? And I find that very encouraging that, maybe we're not quite as smart as we think we are. And that means we always have not only the capacity, but the responsibility to learn.
Absolutely. Go on, Chris.
Yeah, I was going to say, it's interesting that Trey's just said that, because I talked about last week. I did a podcast somewhere last week, and I was talking about, are we, and this would be interesting to have your view on this, Trey, are we, or do you think we might be manifesting some of this by the very nature of looking?
That's a great question. You have some older psychologists like Carl Jung, and then some other researchers like the absolutely wonderful John Keel and Brad Steiger. Talked about manifesting, that we go and look at a phenomena, and perhaps the phenomena actually morph itself into what we think we want to see. And there's a reason that people that have a very strong, religiosity, Roman Catholic type, see apparitions of Mary, while, folks like me who are Protestant, we just don't see, apparitions of Mary. And perhaps the phenomena actually reflects what you think that you want to see, and you think you, more importantly, need to see. And then we start looking at that maybe on a quantum level. Okay, as we know that these things, and I believe this with every fabric of my being, John Keel called these things ultra-terrestrial. Okay, I coined a phrase in my first book where I call them paradimensional. So these are entities and things that exist in other dimensions other than our own. And depending on what part of the whole, this multidimensional, either entity, object, thought pattern, whatever part of that thing actually touches down into our three-dimensional Euclidean universe, is what we see. And so your UFO, your Bigfoot, your ghost, your whatever, might all be different facets of the same diamond. They might be the same thing, just albeit looking at it from a different perspective. Dimensional perspective.
Excellent. I've just got a bit of an audio issue. I don't know whether it was my end then. Chris, had you?
No, I got it, and it would go in and out. But I got everything Trey said. I don't think it's done. It's back in now. It's back in. Yeah, it's cool.
So let's jump to a specific one that fascinates me, if you don't mind.
Sure.
The cubes, and like we'll call them squares, blocks, whatever you want. But for me, the cubes, because I'm getting reports of cubes, not particularly on the cliff tops either, but we do see squares of light, or they have been reported. But what are your views? What are they, Trey?
That's a really a good question, because I'm working on my second book, and I'm actually in the middle of writing a chapter about cubes or boxes. And so let's get in the Wayback Machine and go way back in time. The cube or box is considered a sacred shape. During the Israelites wandering in the desert, when they built the tabernacle, the whole of the Ark of the Covenant and other artifacts, is that inner part of the tent of the tabernacle was shaped like a cube. Okay, so the cube was sacred. And that's where the Israelites at that time believed that the actual means to communicate with God existed inside of that sacred space, i.e. the Ark of the Covenant. That was their holy or holies, or sanctum sanctorum. Now you move forward in time to the Israelites defeating the defenders of Jerusalem and actually taking over Jerusalem. And King Solomon was told by God to build the temple, the first temple. And once again, the sanctum sanctorum, the place of the Holy of Holies, was a cube. And inside of that cube was the Ark of the Covenant. And that was the only place where man could directly communicate with God. And that was only done during certain times of the year. So there's something about this shape. There's something about this shape that makes it whole, that makes it pure, and makes it sacred. So let's fast forward even a little bit more. So we've covered Jewish tradition, we've covered Christian tradition, or we've covered, we'll get to Christian condition. In Christian condition, John the Revelator in the book of Revelations talks about the New Jerusalem dropping down from the sky. And the New Jerusalem is a cube, about 1,400 miles cubed, length, width, and height. And that is the perfect city where Christ will reign, according to the New Testament, from this perfect cube as this city drops down. Once again, it's holy, it's sacred, and it's very special and very powerful. In Mecca, Islam has something called the Kaaba, which is a large black cube. That part of the Hajj, the very end of it, is Muslims are encouraged to march around the Kaaba to complete their Hajj, their once-in-a-lifetime Hajj. And what's really interesting is on the corner of the Kaaba, there's a fixture, and inside of that fixture is a meteorite. And that meteorite actually goes back to prehistory and was considered sacred by prehistoric people, and brought forward and is even considered sacred in modern day Islam. So we come to the Middle Ages, and as alchemists, we're trying to work out the mysteries of the universe using sacred geometry and other means, the mixture of different chemicals and elements. Is they had a thing called the prima materia, which means prime material, which is the building block. And notice I said the word block of all matter. The prima materia is conceptualized and shown as a black cube. I actually have a woodcut that I found that shows the prima materia being represented as black cubes flying in the air. So there's something, deep in our genetic DNA, deep in our memory, going back generations, that holds the cube to be sacred. It's something, it's a threshold to another place. It's a magical doorway to get to either another state of consciousness, another state of spirituality, or I dare say, perhaps maybe even a different place or different dimension.
and the cubes, where does it fit into the meadow? And unless you want to move on to something else, I'm fascinated.
Yeah, no, that's fine.
I hope everybody else is.
Yeah, the cubes are great. And so as we were researching back in 2017, I'm looking at my notes right here. We had a lot of really strange things happen, that particular evening. One thing that we saw on our thermal were, dare I say, entities. They were figures that we picked up about 1.5 meters tall, maybe a meter wide. I'm sorry, about 2 meters tall, 1.5 meters wide. And they would shrink, tall, short, and then morph into two. And we're picking this up on our thermal. It doesn't correspond with any known team members. So as we're watching that, we get a radio transmission from one of our other teams deployed elsewhere in the meadow. And they said, hey, we're seeing something very anomalous on our thermals. You need to come and check it out. So I beat feed over there. And what they described to me was on their thermal, they picked up a cube or a box that was not visible with the naked eye. It appeared at one place in the meadow, and then it appeared at another place, and then it appeared at a third place. And this cube was actually colder than the ambient air temperature. So it was colder than its surroundings. So that's significant, because if we go back in paranormal lore, people talk about the temperature dropping when ghosts appear, or as it turns out, something coming from another dimension, the temperature drops. So we were having that phenomena go on. And by the time we got over there, it pretty much dissipated. You could barely see the outlines of it on the thermals, but we decided to dispatch a team to it. We dispatched a team to it, and as we're watching them on our thermal, they enter the threshold of where this thing was. They completely disappear from our thermals. We can't see them. And this was in February, in the mountains here, in the southeastern USA. So it was cold. There's no reason, that I can think of why we would lose the thermal signatures of 3 people. And then they came back out, and we asked them to describe what it was they experienced. And they said when they got over the threshold, this imaginary threshold, that things became very quiet, very silent, that it was very dark and, without form and void, almost like being inside of a room made out of blackout curtains.
Yeah.
And it was cold. The temperature dropped. So, luckily for them, discretion took the better part of valor. And after about 60 seconds, 90 seconds, they decided to turn around and come back out. Now, here's another weird thing. When they went in unencumbered, i.e. they walked in, they weren't stepping over roots or, fighting branches or anything. They just walked in, very easily. When they came out 180 degrees from the way they went in, they started encountering briars and brambles and things that weren't there before. So it's almost like there were 2 realities existing in that meadow at the same time. Now, where do we see that? On the quantum scale, you see that like with the dual slit experiment, where light is a particle and it's a wave, at the same time. So are we seeing quantum effects on a macro scale, due to these incursions into our dimension by forces, beings, intelligences unknown?
What do you think, Chris?
Yeah. I was just going to say, Trey, is the obvious question here, it's probably already been asked, but like geologically, we have that question come up all the time about Bempton. It comes up about Skinwalker. It comes up about the Wilson Ranch. What's the geology of the place like?
The geology it's a high quartz. We'll actually find large pieces of quartz laying on the ground.
Really?
The area that it's in is known for caves. And that's something here in the U.S. There seems to be some sort of correlation between caves and high strangeness. I don't know if it's the same way, your side of the Atlantic.
Yeah.
The geology, I've kind of taken a page out of Steve Mera's book and looked at the geomagnetism of the area. It's not really that anomalous. It's a little bit, but it's low geomagnetism, not high geomagnetism. And what I've kind of been seeing is places west of the Mississippi, you'll see a higher gravitational reading over the baseline, and here on places east of the Mississippi, you'll see it lower. So so there is a little
negative. It's negative magnetic anomaly.
Right.
Yeah.
And so what we've been experimenting now is, once again, Steve Mira recommended this, is using a time displacement meter and see if we can pick up any, shifts of time, as you have a gravitational sink will cause time to run differently. Strangely enough, we don't see a whole lot of EMF, very few EMF. But on the other hand, we have Geiger counters, and we do see these radiation spikes, not dangerous spikes, but significantly, like doubling the baseline of 0.06 microsieverts per hour to like 0.12, 0.33, 0.66 microsieverts per hour. We've had in some cases. So that's kind of the environment that we're working in.
And then, Trey, when you've sort of passed through this area where you've got the higher readings with the Geiger counter, do you go back and find that everything's normal? On occasion, yeah.
Oh yeah. It fluctuates, and we've been trying to figure out if there's a correlation. Of course, correlation is not causation; it's correlation. But we're trying to see if there's a correlation between radiation spikes and either a precursor or postcursor of high strangeness, or if it can be an indicator that high strangeness is actually going on. So we've been piddling with that, but we did have one interesting thing that happened to us with radiation, which I thought was really neat. And once again, it's one of those kind of out of left field things. Is we bring a lot of techniques, from other fields. I'll bring techniques from the paranormal field, because if they work, they work. I don't care where I don't care where I get the tool to put in my toolbox. If the tool works, the tool works. Yeah. So one thing we were experimenting with was old school dowsing rods, shaped like an L, and they do the dowsing rod thing. And so I had two team members, asking questions, and it appeared that they were getting answers, yes, no to specific questions. And I'd placed my Geiger counter and my EMF meter on the ground next to my pack. And one of the questions were, if you are cooperating with us, can you make the reading on this machine go to 0.13, which was 0.13 microsieverts, which was above the baseline of about 0.06. And believe it or not, the Geiger counter went to 0.13 and stayed right at 0.13 until we released it. So it's almost like
not coincidence. That's not
chance. It's implying a high degree of intelligence as well, isn't it?
Yeah. Like we used to say, during the Cold War in the spook business is, one time is an accident, second time is a coincidence, third time is enemy action. So this was not a coincidence, that this particular thing was going on. So it's it's really it's just amazing that whatever it is, the other seems to be intelligent. It seems to be sentient. And it seems to be willing to communicate with us at some times. Sometimes it doesn't, but every once in a while, we'll get a response.
Well, Trey, I've got. Oh, sorry, Chris. I was just going to cut across and say we need some questions in 2 or 3 minutes, if you're good with that, Trey.
Sure.
Yeah. Sure.
Yep.
No, I was just going to mention. I just wondered if there was any correlation, and not necessarily is the same with Bempton other than the ocean. But Trey, is there any connection with deep water or anything like that?
Not deep water. I mean, this place is not coastal, but strange you should mention water. Right adjacent to it is it would either be categorized as a small river or very large creek or stream, but it's a pretty significant body of running water adjacent to the Meadow, to the south, or I'm sorry, to the north of it. And so that's something else to take into account. There are some people believe there's a correlation between running water
and quartz, and this kind of effects and like charged energies there. That's fascinating. Providing you're okay, Trey, because usually what's happening is we're getting questions backing up and we don't get through them. If there is, here we go. And go on, I'll let Chris read these out if you don't mind.
Karen Berman. Hi, Karen. Karen's just asking what encounter has affected you the most and has left an indelible mark that forever changed your outlook.
Well, thanks, Karen. This whole experience has changed my viewpoint. Now, I did study under the legendary parapsychologist Dr. William Roll at university, so I've always had kind of an open mind to this. But what really affected me is when my team members early in this research started experiencing missing time, and they started experiencing like their GPS track upon review would show them being places where they never could have been. And the thing that really throws a monkey wrench into this whole thing is we've started doing hypnotic regression with some of our team members.
Cool.
And, I hate to go all, Bud Hopkins on you, but the stuff that's come out in hypnotic regression sounds a lot like the abduction phenomena.
Right.
And that, that's unnerving.
Yeah.
And you have to be at an okay place psychologically to kind of understand that and to gird your loins and to continue to go out and do research.
Trey, was it immediately apparent that they had missing time, or was this something that they discovered later?
No, it was immediate. I'll just kind of describe the the event to you, because it's really fascinating, because there's a whole bunch of stuff. This was about a year before the box, and we were out there investigating, and we had several teams in the meadow, and they had another team, another individual, run across the top of the ridge to see if he could flush anything down or see anything down below him, or where we were down in the meadow. And this was before we tightened up our protocols, and we had this individual go out by himself. And so the idea was we would go out and get set up. We'd get our thermal set up, our night vision set up, our EMFs and all our equipment. We would radio back to him and have him start walking, and we would look and see if anything changed in the environment. So he's coming back out and he says, "Oh, I forgot a piece of equipment. I'm going to run back to base camp and get it." So this is about half a mile. So he goes back, and we're waiting for him to radio back that he's in position so we can start watching for him. And he says, "Hey guys, I just got to the downed tree," which is a very well-known landmark in this area, "and I don't remember how I got here." And so the first thing is our paramedics, thought maybe he's having some sort of medical event. So they start, over the radio, they're doing, do you have tingling in any part of your body? Does your head hurt? Repeat Mary had a little lamb, because they're thinking maybe a stroke or something like that, or an aneurysm. And he passed all of those with flying colors. And of course, one thing that we do as researchers is we have a normalcy box. We like to think things are normal, perhaps, when they're not. And we fell into that because we thought, well, maybe he was just so focused on the mission, he wasn't thinking, and he just got there. Like we've done going to work, you just kind of pull up in the parking lot and go, I don't even remember the trip. So we brushed it off to that. So he goes up across the top of the ridge, drops down. Two of my team members are watching him through thermal and visually. And they see his, they can see him on thermal and night vision walking along. They drop the night vision, and where he was standing, there's like this red orb. And this orb moves at an incredibly high rate of speed, and we calculated at about 23 miles per hour, and stops. And they bring the thermal back up on the orb, and there he is standing there, the same guy that had the missing time. Right. And so they get on the radio and they say, "Hey, are you okay?" And they are watching him on thermal, and they see the figure on the thermal bring the radio up to their mouth and key it. And at that time, he says, "Yes, I'm fine." "What? Why? What's going on?" They said, "You need to come to us immediately." So he comes over to them, and they said, "Are you okay?" And he's like, "Yeah, I'm fine." "Why?" "We saw you turn into a ball of energy and move at a high rate of speed and then rematerialize." And he's like, "No, I didn't. I just walked over here." And they said, No, man, you moved at an incredible rate of speed. We saw you, two witnesses. One witness has a master's degree from in public administration, has a degree from the Georgia Institute of Technology, which is a very well-respected school here. The other one has a degree from Georgia Tech in both philosophy and physics, U.S. Army Ranger, very down-to-earth, competent men that are used to reporting what they see professionally. And they said, "Bob, we saw you turn into a sphere of energy and move." And he said, "No, I didn't. I just walked over here." So once again, here you have two realities existing at the same time in the same place. So to make matters even stranger, the next morning, Bob comes over to us and he shows us his GPS. And he says, "Look at these track lines on the GPS." because he's a former search and rescue guy and always leaves the breadcrumb function on his GPS, so he always can show where he was. And it shows him being on the other side of the small river, and in other places 2 or 3 kilometers away from us, moving in a straight line. Now, this terrain, you cannot move in a straight line unless you're in the air.
Yeah.
And so we told him.
Sorry, go on.
Oh, yeah. We told him, when you get home, save that file, send it to us, and we can bring up our geo programs and look at it, on maps and stuff and try to figure out what's going on. And like happened so many times, by the time he got home and pulled out the SD card, it was erased. There was no data on it.
Well, I'm just thinking of similarities here, Trey, because that's an amazing account. But I think I've told Chris, Lynn is in chat, who's part of the team where we go. And Jeremy will watch this later. And they've both got different tools on their phones for GPS and tracking. Jeremy's been out at sea with his. Linny has been 5 miles inland. As a collective, we'd all been together. So I don't know whether he'd gone on his own or whether we'd all gone. But he'd managed to save all the screenshots, and so did Jeremy. So that might be something that we want to talk about in a week or two or whatever. We'll get Linny on here or get somebody on. But so many similarities, Trey. Any more questions? Maybe? Yeah, excellent.
Trey, do you believe there are similarities between the Meadow and Hessdalen?
Hessdalen lights. Yeah, that's a good question. I am not aware of any incidences of high strangeness there in that valley other than just the strange lights. Like, I haven't heard of any missing time. Now, I could be wrong. I'm not an expert on that particular area.
We had Carl Crusher on.
Oh, Carl, yeah.
A few months ago, and Carl's been out there, and he got talking to locals, and apparently there's cryptid reports and other strange reports. Maybe the guys at Starlin, and I know Philip Mantles is probably one of his best friends in the world, is the guy who was leader of that project there. And maybe they're just heavily invested in the lights. You've got a lot of people who just seem to stick in one box.
Well, and that's one of the the traps you can fall into this business is if you go into the world looking for UFOs, then you're missing all the other stuff going on around you. You're missing the cryptids and the ghosty stuff and all of that.
Yeah.
And I don't tell people I'm not a ufologist. I'm not a cryptologist. I'm a weird crapologist. If it's weird crap, I'm going to look into it. So I think you have to keep an open mind.
It's a good analogy.
Lee Roscoe's got a question. What's the strangest thing you've heard or seen ungrounded in the Meadow?
Does he mean underground or underground? Probably.
Yeah, there are caves in the area. If we're talking underground, there are caves in the area. I don't know of any underneath here. I know James Keenan from my Skinwalker Ranch fame wants to come out really bad and run some of his equipment to see if we have any subterranean abnormalities. Now, or if we look at it as being ungrounded, things that change the way I look at the world, it would have to be, probably the possible abduction phenomena, and then the experience with our team member turning into the ball of light was very strange too. It was pretty creepy.
Yeah. Thank you.
Ian Lynn is saying any footage of the cubes, Trey?
Yes. And I'm thinking about what I can say and can't say. I will say this. There is footage of the cubes. Or cube. People have seen it when I lecture. It's one of the things is I actually show the video. And in the future, and I'm not talking way in the future, I'm talking, in the future, is I hope that this footage in the story of the Meadow will be exposed to a very, very large audience. Excellent. So, and I don't have permission to go into it any more than that until we're ready to put it out there publicly, but it will be out there and everyone will be able to see this footage. As a side note, is I was on Discovery Channel last year. There was a show called Alien Encounters Fact or Fiction. And the thing that I presented was the cube video with the team disappearing. And they sent it out to several experts who I didn't pick the experts, but it just so happens it's people I know. And the only thing they could come up with was inconclusive. There was no evidence of forgery, hoaxing, nothing like that. It was inconclusive. So, when you see a strange light in the sky that you can't conclude what it is, you've gone to look at Flight Radar 24, it doesn't have any navigation lights. What do you call that? That's called a UFO or UAP.
Yeah.
So there's a term that I'm going to be using in my second book called a unknown terrestrial event, a UTE. These are things that happen on the ground that defy all explanation. And that's where all that, uncategorized, unknown stuff will go into. I was going to call it a UTI, unknown terrestrial event, but nobody wants to go out in the woods and say, I went out in the woods and had a UTI, which is a urinary tract infection. So I didn't use UTI. So it's UTE. So, yeah.
Excellent. And I do know why Linny asked that. Oh, sorry. I'll just quickly say, we've got some thermal footage from up there.
Mm-hmm.
Spherical object, but then in frame captures, when you break it down, it's a cube at times.
Oh.
That's on thermal. But we'll deal with that later. And there's Karen's question there.
Karen.
The black orbs, Trey.
Black orbs. I have not seen black orbs. We've seen orbs at night. Let's see. I've seen a red one. Most of ours are that kind of whitish, yellowish that we see out there. And we have things out there that's really, really unusual. And I don't know if you're familiar with Katie Page, who Yeah. So Katie has been out there at the Meadow several times, and she's experienced it there. We call them fairy lights, which are like very faint twinkling lights in the forest, and they just happen for a fraction of a second. We've actually been able to capture it once on camera. And so we have those, and they're like micro orbs, if you will. But we've also seen some, larger orbs. We had an orb in a very kind of weird, disturbing case that was a yellowish orange orb, but not so much black orbs. No.
Okay, thank you. Oh, have you ever experienced Sasquatch, Dogman phenomena at all, Stephen Colling?
Stephen, great question. Yes, we have. That area is well known for Sasquatch sightings. We have on video, on thermal, something that appears to be a large humanoid with long gangly arms, head sitting on top of its shoulders, which weirdly enough is colder than its surroundings. It's like it's just coming into existence. It's just, right on that edge. And the dog man, this also gets very weird, is we have not seen the dog man there at the Meadow. But if you go and read Collars and Knapp's book, Skinwalkers at the Pentagon, they talk about, after doing their research at Skinwalker Ranch, there were sightings of dog men at the homes of some of the researchers. They would see these. Probably about 8 months ago in my backyard, only 40 meters from my back door, I found a track line of canine prints, except the canine prints were 6 inches in diameter. They were huge.
Yeah.
They were, like this big around. No explanation. There's no indigenous creature like that in this area that would leave those kind of prints. So, dog man, multidimensional creature, who knows?
So is Dogman the new woodland version of the Men in Black? But, because we get a UFO sighting, typically years ago, people would say some men in suits knocked on my door. I know the Dogman's not knocked on anybody's door, but You're talking about seeing them in an urban environment.
Yeah. I mean, that's really a cool observation, because the Dogmen, if you go and look at here in the States, you look at somewhere like Marley Woods, which was the very famous place that was researched by Ted Phillips, and others. And they have reports of dogmen, big cryptid upright creatures stepping across fence lines and moving into the woods. You have dogmen sightings in some of these other places, where they've had high strange. And I just talked about the Skinwalker Ranch, and then we have these these canine sites back behind my home. So there, is a dog man another manifestation of a segment of this multidimensional reality that we just happen to encounter, perhaps? I know, the reason you called your film Wolflands is because there was a canine aspect to it, large canines. So, there seems to be something about that. Now, as far as actually seeing, like in the famous Warren Zevon song, the Werewolf of London, walking down with a Chinese menu in his hand. No, I've never seen anything quite that vivid, but, we have seen certain things that make us think there might be some sort of dog man, correlation there.
Yeah.
Yeah, Tanya's just asking about the feeling about the cube. What was the general consensus?
Pretty neutral. We were. This is what we do. We're high strangeness researchers, and we were really more intrigued at the time. And when our team went in and disappeared off our thermal and came back out, then that's when a little bit of anxiety, manifested, because what could have happened to them? Where were they? Were they in another dimension? Were they in another universe? And could they have become entrapped there? But as far as the the general gestalt, the feeling of it, it was really neutral. It's this place is really odd because you'll go in there and at times it's very very peaceful, very nice, very beautiful. And other times you'll go in there and it just feels wrong for some reason. You can't really articulate it, but it just feels off. So, but that particular evening, there was a little bit of excitement because we had seen the figures, the thermal man-sized figures. So we were kind of a little bit on edge, but the actual cube itself was, we were really more just interested in trying to figure out what it was. So we didn't, have a chance to really think about it and get, wigged out about it. But it was kind of neutral.
Yeah. Trey, earlier on you mentioned just another research like Katie Page. Have you found any difference in the energy in there when you bring females, and is it like when you introduced a feminine energy into that place? Is there anything happened? Any difference?
I don't know, because I've always been very open-minded about stuff, and we have some of our top researchers on our team are females, so they've always been there. And the famous black our famous portal cube video was actually shot by one of our female members. So we've always had that feminine energy there, and I think that's just it's a good way of going about doing things. Now, so Katie, she wasn't the only female there when she came out and researched with us. We had other ladies there, and now we continue to do so.
That's an interesting observation, that, Chris, and one that you maybe even thought of, Trey. But it'd be interesting to note if a certain type of phenomena presented, say when it were just a male environment, opposed to a more predominantly female.
Yeah. Well, it was the reason I mentioned it, Paul, is because on occasion you do get a few girls go up there, don't you, with yourself? But predominantly your team, the team that frequents Bempton, is pretty much male, isn't it?
Pretty much male, yeah, absolutely. And for the most part, I mean, there were so many things you were saying there, Trey. And the word that you used, because it was in my head, off. Sometimes you just go and it just feels off. We were up there last night and we said, there's nothing here tonight. It just feels flat. There's, but occasionally, it feels off. It's not a nice environment, or it doesn't feel suppressive. So there's so many things that you were saying, but I don't. Are we moving on, or is there more questions?
Yeah, we'll move on, and we'll get to the questions. We'll have another bat at them in about 25 minutes or so.
Yeah. Okay.
Sorry, Trey, I wanted to ask you about. I was listening to some of your stuff, even probably a couple of months ago, and you were saying about you're kind of insistent now that you like to keep the area sort of like pristine and not almost secretive, if you can, about its exact location. Can you tell us why you do that?
Yeah, that's something I'm very strict about. Is like I said, this area is on public land, and that means anybody has a right to access it. If you're here in the United States, you have a right to access this area. And before I started really researching the Meadow, I'd gone out with a good friend to do some cryptid research in a place called the Uwharrie National Forest in North Carolina. and it's been featured on several of the the U.S. Bigfoot shows and all of that. And we went out there, and the first evening at this this particular place that's well known, this campground. Got there, nobody was there. Woke up Saturday morning, and it was absolutely covered up with tents, like people had came in Friday night. And the campground is called Yates Place. And so we went out and we're trying to do some Sasquatch research, and we were hearing tree knocks and howls. And it's like, okay, so what's a tree knock that somebody else is doing in response to our tree knock? Or is that a real howl, or is that somebody else? Or is somebody going to hoax this? Or, it just became ridiculous. It just became silly because the place was outed on national television. So turn the page. Here we are at the Meadow. We're having these experiences. And my idea is to try to keep the place as pristine as possible. We're very serious researchers when we go out. We go out there with an operations plan. We have to define teams. We have areas of coverage that people are assigned to. We all have radio comms. We have a base camp with a net controller for our comms. We have a medical officer. We're very serious about what we do. And what I don't want is us being out there doing very serious research and have, some Yahoo come out who has a camera on his phone and a digital recorder, thinks he's a researcher, and really spoils the environment. And I know that sounds elite. It sounds like elitism, and maybe it is. But I want to keep this place as pristine as possible. Now, that doesn't mean I don't have guest researchers. I have guest researchers come out all the time. But one thing that everybody is required to do is we have a operation security plan, and we have a list of things that you cannot talk about if you come out and research with us, and you sign an NDA.
Ah, cool.
And so you will not discuss these things. And what I tell people is, when you come out and research with us, your experience is yours. That's not my experience. I don't have any right. That's your experience in the world. Share that, loud and proud. Tell everybody about your experience, but do not disclose the location, because as long as we can keep the location secret, we can continue to do quality research without it being contaminated by, other people, or, somebody that wants to come out and try to hoax us or things like that.
Sure.
Absolutely. Yeah. And even if they weren't hoaxing, it can taint it, can't it? Because they could be in a location half a mile away with a I don't know, some kind of light that throws you guys completely.
Yeah.
And absolutely. I mean, we don't really have that luxury because on the cliff tops of eastern North Yorkshire, because yours is public land, but it's a public right away, and it's not forest. Right. You're right on edge at North Sea, and it gets visitors in daytime anyway. But I can 100%, I think, agree and see where you're coming from with that.
Yeah.
Well, it makes sense. You're trying to, I guess, recreate the laboratory conditions where you're controlling the experiments and what goes on there. Yeah, if you've got random events happening all the time, there's no correlation. It's difficult, makes it difficult.
And I know some of the folks, from like the Blind Frog Ranch television show, and I was speaking to Dwayne Ollinger, one day, and he said as soon as that came out, on public, television on the networks, is he started having a real problem with trespassers and, people sneaking on there. And then, the Skinwalker Ranch has the same. That's why they have armed security at Skinwalker Ranch 24/7, is because, people are trying to sneak in there to, do their own research, and it really compromises the research that, the other people are doing. So, that's kind of why we try to keep it on the down low.
Do you have a specialist members that are specifically specialize on certain things within team then, Trey?
Yeah, we try to. We have, my background is in intelligence. Not that I'm an intelligent person, but that's just what my background is. So, I'm kind of an analyst guy, and I'm also a former Army officer. So, I do the command and control. I develop the op orders. I develop the tactical order where this is what we're going to do for this particular night. And then also develop the overarching operations order for the entire expedition. We have medical personnel that are, trained, trauma nurses, paramedics, and things like that. We have other individuals that are retired law enforcement that are used to collecting data, and laying out the facts, that also have some tactical expertise and act as team security when we go out there. Because unfortunately, this area has a very dark reputation. You know, you find bodies out there. Has been, you know, a cult murder out there, you know, not too long ago. You know, so it's kind of a hinky area where bad people go into remote areas to do bad, you know, nasty things. And probably one of the most exciting thing is we have a psychoanalyst on our team, like a no kidding psychoanalyst, and he's been helping us with two things. One is he's the one that's been facilitating the hypnotic regression. And he's also the one that uses, we do guided meditation, which we can set the intent through group meditation on what we want the weekend to look like, you know, and that goes back to your manifestation question is, you know, can we prime the pump, if you will, to have a productive weekend? And something we brought into that particular mix is a piece of equipment called the Koran or God helmet, which uses electromagnetic fields to stimulate different parts in your brains to create a different state of awareness, you know, and there's been some studies on that. Robert Persinger, you know, did a lot of study on that and used that in a clinic setting. So, you know, we do have a lot of specialists. I try to not sounding elitist, because that's not what I want this to sound like, but we try to get very well grounded people that are not prone to hysteria. You know, we do take into account a person's education. That doesn't mean you have to be formally university educated, but we do take that into account. And we look at the gestalt, the whole person, and see if they'll be a really good fit. And if they're not, you know, then they're not brought onto the team. And there's a probationary period, you know, before you're actually brought into the fold as a full member. So it's, you know, we're kind of restricted, you know. When we do that, believe you me, I get a lot of people saying, I want to be part of the team. And I'll ask, well, what can you bring to the table? You know, what specifically, you know, can you bring to the table? You know, like if Dr. Gary Nolan came up and asked to be a member of the team, absolutely, you know, because he has that experience of, you know, injuries on people encountering high strangeness. But, you know, somebody, you know, high school student, you know, maybe not so much.
Yep. Excellent. Thank you.
Trey, you mentioned obviously your security training there and with the armed forces and everything else. But I mean, what are the chances? I mean, you must have thought about this back then. What are the chances of you ending up now doing what you're doing now? Have you ever given that any thought? Do you think there's any coincidence in that at all?
You know, my interest in this stuff actually goes all the way back to the 70s. You know, I used to watch, you know, In Search of with Leonard Nimoy. And I always like, you know, the sci-fi stuff, like I love Space 1999, you know, Gary Anderson's, you know, fantastic series there. And so I always had kind of an interest in this stuff. And my father also, you know, likewise had an interest. And he and I would discuss it quite a bit. And then I went to university. And like I said, I studied under Dr. William Roll and some others. And the particular program I went through was very focused on a transpersonal and humanistic type of psychology, which is the psychology of the human experience, and transpersonal is how can we as humans transcend into other higher states of being, you know, either through religious experiences, meditation, you know, whatever. How can we become more than we are? And so it's kind of a natural fit. So, you know, I became a, you know, Army intelligence officer. And it's really interesting that Army intelligence, U.S. Army Intelligence and Security Command under the command of General Burt Stubblebine were the ones that started remote viewing. That all came from General Stubblebine. And the movie Men Who Stare at Goats is not fiction. That's a factual book that General Stubblebine and others were trying to come up with ways to take U.S. Army soldiers from the intelligence community, special operations community, and have them transcend, you know, our understanding of existence so they can carry out military operations. So not that I was involved in any of that stuff in the military, but that was kind of, you know, the feelings of U.S. Army intelligence back in the 80s in the Cold War. So then, you know, I became a standard, you know, ghost guy. I was a paranormal investigator. I'd go out to the houses and, you know, I can't even tell you how many recordings of, you know, disembodied footsteps, disembodied voices, EVPs, you know, the different protocols, instrumental transcommunication. And then I started taking that out into the woods, out into the wilderness, you know, taking that expertise out there. And that's when I became a weird crapologist, because I started discovering that, you know, places where you go out in the world and you see like a lot of UFOs, and places where you see like a lot of, folkloric ghost stuff or folkloric fae and things like that, in places where you have a lot of reports of cryptids, a lot of times they're geographically concentrated. There's these really tight areas where all of this stuff is going on at once. And that's where you take your push pin with your little flag, and you stick it there, and that's where you go research. And that's what we came across.
Do you think you can, on some occasions when you go out there with the team then, Trey, because you said you coordinate this, do you think you can almost tailor what type of experience you might want through the meditation? Or does it constantly just throw you a curveball?
It's just basically what we do is we just try to say, we're here. If something wants to happen, then we're receptive to it. We are not, we're not a threat. We're not trying to, banish you, whatever you are. We're not your enemies. If you wish to communicate with us or you wish to experience something with us, we're receptive. And I think going out there with the right mindset, you hear this all the time. You go into something with a positive attitude and positive things will happen. I did that through my whole, professional career. And you hear that, at a business seminar, be positive and positive things will happen. Same thing with us. If we go out there with a positive attitude, a lot of times things will happen. But as far as specific things happening, like I talked about earlier, this place throws you curveballs. I mean, the phenomena we were experiencing early on in this project are very different than the phenomena we're experiencing now. Yeah. So you just have to kind of roll with the punches and, kind of keep your feet on terra firma when something, totally unexpected happens, and just, try to document, record the phenomena and enjoy it as much as you can.
Trey, do you get the feeling that those curveballs are purposely thrown you in your direction, though?
Maybe, or maybe it's just by whatever means the other wants to communicate and interact with you that day. I wish I had an answer to that. I really don't, because it's such a wide variety of experiences. And sometimes things that, have worked in the past now that have been dormant, all of a sudden now they're working again. So, other times, kind of like you said, you'll go out to your place and it's dead. We've gone out to the Meadow, spent 4 or 5 days out there and it's completely dead. There's nothing going on. So something, and I don't know if y'all do this, is try not to oversaturate an area with research. We usually try to give it about 2 to 3, 4 months between expeditions to kind of, get back to the baseline of the place.
And do you think that's because you're more refreshed then as well, and sort of more in tune with what you wanted to get in touch with?
Yeah, and I think so, maybe. And I use this analogy, and I don't know if this is accurate or not. This is just an analogy. Is if you imagine you have a crew of workers and they're repairing a sidewalk, and they have their cement poured out and they're finishing the cement. And this is the others doing whatever it is they're doing. So they're working. And so as these workers are working, this little kid comes up and he's a little blabbermouth. He's asking him all kinds of questions and he's just yak, 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 yak. The workers have several options. Number one, they can just ignore the kid. Number two, they can frighten the kid and run him off. Or number three, they can maybe choose to engage with the kid on their level and under their rules. We're the kid. The others are doing whatever it is they're doing, which we might not even be able to comprehend with our mind because it's probably multidimensional. So we come up and we try to interact with the workers. And once again, they have those 3 options: frighten us off, shoo us away, ignore us, or maybe we're very lucky engage with us in some way. And the way they engage with us might not be the way we are expecting. It might be in something totally different.
Good analogy.
Yeah, it is. Yeah, it is a good analogy. Yeah. Lorraine, do you want to look at the next bunch of questions, please? It's Tonya Morrison again. Is the Meadow in the plains or is it hilly?
Hilly. It's mountainous. It's basically in a valley. You have like a steep valley, then you have this small river, and then you have this big open meadow. It's like a big field. But we have trees, 50, 60, 70, 80 feet tall, all around it. So it's very mountainous.
Have you had things happen at home? Do you think it's connected to your Meadow investigation? So the hitchhiker effect.
Steve took my question. Steve, you've took my question.
Yeah, absolutely. The hitchhiker phenomena has happened to several of our folks. I'm going to talk about what's happened to some others, and I'll go to my personal thing. Is one of my team members after the infamous cube or box weekend, she had gone home and her young son was playing on their elliptical exercise machine. He was like maybe 3 years old, 4 years old. And so they're filming him, playing on this machine, and he's pointing up in the air going, ball, ball, ball. And so they look and say, we don't see a ball. What are you talking about? And then they look on the screen of their phones as they're filming him, and they can see an orb floating around. And he's pointing at the orb, but they can't see it with their naked eyes. So that was something that happened after, the very strange cube or box experience. Personally, I had an experience where, and this sounds very minor, but I had a small LED flashlight that I sat on my desk, my desk is just right over there. I sat the LED flashlight on my desk and was working, and I turned around and the flashlight is gone. And, I looked underneath the desk. I looked all over, thought I might have put it in my pocket. Couldn't be found. And I'm in a little cottage on my property, and sometimes I sleep out here when my back is bothering me, so I don't keep my wife awake. So I went upstairs, went to bed, woke up the next morning, came down the stairs, looked on the desk, and there was the LED flashlight. So something, it's like that trickster element, that's just playing with you. So we've got things like that. Nothing terribly malicious has happened to the team members. A lot of times it's just like little kind of playing things. The one person I told you about earlier that had videotaped the shadow person and refuses to come back out to the meadow. Now, he had something follow him home that weekend that was unnerving. So he was finally able to get rid of that attachment. But that's very common in areas of high strangeness. As you read, many accounts of that, like you said, the hitchhiker effect, things following people home. And that's why it's really important. Anybody out there that's listening to this, if you want to get into this kind of research, you really have to be prepared for it, because it's not a joke. You have to be prepared to psychologically, and this can hurt you physically. There are certain negative physical things that can happen to you that are well documented. And so you really have to be in the right frame of mind and really understand what you're getting into. It's, if you want to get a tape recorder and a video camera and just go out there and have fun, it might be more than you expect. So, that's just, I'm going to throw that out there because, we've had some negative things happen to us over the years.
So do you think then, Trey, that we become host victims for something? Do you think they follow us home, or do you think it's just a thought process? Do you think we can connect by the intermind connection, what I call it in Truth Proof, the first book?
I think it's that exactly, the intermind connection. But what I think happens is people that are really researching this stuff, and especially if we psychologically are opening ourselves up to understanding that there's something greater than us. It's like if you have an AM radio, you can only receive frequencies that are AM, that are amplitude modulation. You can't receive frequency modulation, which is FM. Doesn't mean FM doesn't exist. It just means your radio can't receive it. Yeah. But as we become more attuned to this, as we open up our minds, as we do more introspection, we open up our bandwidth. And now we can receive signals that perhaps we didn't think was there before, but in reality have always been there. Ultraviolet, infrared, it's always been there. But we can't see it with the naked eye. But nevertheless, that doesn't mean it doesn't exist.
What a great way of putting it. Yeah, absolutely. Are there any more questions? Excellent.
There's a question from Andy. Trey, is the quartz in the area you talk of naturally deposited or placed in various locations, if that makes sense? Yeah,
it does. It's natural. It's natural quartz. It's this area, the geography, or rather the geology of it, in this particular area does have quite a bit of quartz. And this area also has been known for gold. It's an area that has been mined for gold. So, some pretty cool mineral stuff there.
Mm. Alison Buttle, hi Trey, have you ever encountered MIBs?
Okay, I'm going to I'm going to go down this rabbit hole, and I have to be kind of careful because we had an experience. I received more information. I had a chance to talk to this individual, and I'm just going to leave it up to people to make up their own minds. Is the night that we had the strange cube, and I talk about this in my first book, we had what I called the mysterious businesswoman of the forest. It is about the time that we put our team in, had our team come out, and we were kind of gathered around talking about it, trying to decide if we wanted to get back and record, do an after action review and record what we experienced, or if we wanted to do more research. I get a call on the radio from our base camp operator. And he said, "There's a woman here." And I said, "I know, there was a friend of one of the team members that was there that stayed with you." "Yes, I know there's a woman." He goes, No, somebody else that just showed up that wants to talk to you." "Okay." And he goes, "You really need to come back to base camp." So we had pretty much decided we wanted to go back to base camp anyway. So I go back to base camp, and there in base camp, and this is in February, so it's cold, it's wintertime, about 10:30 at night, 10:30, 11, in the middle of nowhere is a businesswoman that just happened to drive up, and she's wearing loafers, slacks, a blouse, and a blazer. Not somebody dressed for an outside winter adventure. And she starts trying to convince us to follow her to this deserted road, not too far from where we were, and hike down into the woods to look at a structure where she said lived a family of creatures that she called monkey bears. So here you have this strange woman appearing out of nowhere, wanting you to follow her down a deserted road to hunt for monkey bears. I don't know about y'all, but my answer was hell no. Yeah, because it was just too weird. It's like, is she setting us up to rob us? Because we had many thousands of dollars worth of equipment, as y'all know. It's and we're all self-funded, so we have certainly have a vested interest in keeping our equipment with us. And she just seemed off. She's one of those people that just seemed wrong.
Yeah.
And she started talking to me, and she says, "Oh, well, where did you go to university?" And I told her, I went to the University of West Georgia. And she says, "Oh, I did too." I'm like, "Okay, that's interesting." And she goes, well, what did you study? I said, "Well, my degree's in humanistic psychology." She goes, "Oh, mine too." I'm like, okay, she's just parroting back what she thinks I want to hear. So I'm going to throw a curveball. So I said, "Who are some of your favorite professors?" And she named people that I actually knew, that I studied under.
Mm.
So it's like, okay.
Almost like she'd done some work on you.
Yeah, I mean, that's what it seemed like. And so I'm like, okay, this is really, you talk about feeling things are wrong and off. Mm. We really were starting to become concerned. And so we finally got this, she gave us her name. And so, I looked her up, I did some research, and it turns out that she appeared to be a real person and was in a profession that requires a state licensure. So, I did not want to disclose her name because the way she was acting. Oh, and also I forgot this. This is the weirdest part. Is while she was talking to us, she stopped in mid-conversation, walked off about maybe 15 meters, still within the light of our campsite, squatted down and urinated in front of all of us.
Oh, what?
So, if you go back and you look at John Keel's, descriptions of the men in black, they're not dressed properly. Their dress seems off. There's something odd about the way they dress. There's something about their demeanor that they don't know how human beings interact. It's almost like an autistic person doesn't understand social cueing.
Yeah.
The men in black don't understand that, how human beings communicate. And they seem like a disruptor for your operations. We were trying to do an after-action review of this amazing cube encounter, and she interjects herself right into that and is prohibiting us from doing that, like a spoiler. So this sounds like a classic Men in Black.
Yeah.
So she's a real person. We found her on social media, and we did a little bit of digging around. So, I told this story, on podcast, and it's in my book. And I get a message from a psychotherapist in Istanbul, Turkey, out of the blue. And this guy also was a alumni of the University of West Georgia, which there's a weird synchronicity about that place too. And he actually heard me on a podcast, and he said, do you know about the Carrollton vortex, which is a supposed vortex in the area near the university? And I said, no, I haven't, I'm not familiar with it. That must have happened after I graduated. The guy's quite a bit younger than me. He said, oh, tell me about the woman in the forest. And we were talking about it. And he says, if you don't mind me asking, what was her name? And I gave him her name. And let's say it was Jane. It wasn't Jane Smith. Let's say it was.
Yeah.
He goes, hey, I think I know Jane. Do you mind if I reach out to her and talk to her? And I said, no, please. I'd love to talk to her. I'm not in the interest. I'm not interested in outing her in any way. It was very strange. Now I want to try to get to the bottom of it. So he reaches out to her and she says, no, I had a hard day. The way I unwind is just happen to drive out in a deserted forest in the middle of the night to unwind.
Like you do.
And, I drove by your campsite during the middle of the day and somebody had like a Bigfoot sticker or something on their car. And I wanted to come back and tell you all about the monkey bears that my sister and I would encounter in that area. And it's like,
really?
Was she a real person under the influence of something else? Or, it was just weird. So, about a year goes by and then she contacts me directly. And I stopped telling this story because it's like, I just don't know. It's just too weird.
Yeah.
I can't say it has that level of high strangeness, that I can tie it to something, otherworldly. But she contacts me and she says, I'm so-and-so. I can tell you, I am not a woman in black. I was not under the influence of anything, otherworldly. I just was driving around in the forest and wanted to talk to you. I was not aware that I was interrupting your debriefing, and I apologize for that. And, I just, wanted to get all that straight. And I said, is it possible that there was something influencing your actions maybe you weren't aware of? She goes, no. It was all me. So I don't know. You put that out there, I can rationalize it and say it's exactly what she described it was, but it was weird as hell. I mean, it was just so strange. And one of my team members who had been a paramedic for about 15 years, and he says, I have never seen a person act as weird as she acted. It was just so bizarre. And I just, I can't explain her behavior. So, it's just one of those things you just have to, shrug your shoulder and say, who knows?
Who knows?
Well, talking about people being interested in what you're doing, Trey, have you had any interest at all, or is there any inclination that the military or a branch of it are interested in what you're up to? Have you received any communication at all in that regard? No.
And I'll tell you why I know that is my career for 34 years was as a U.S. Army security specialist. And I was the guy that would keep the secret thing secret. That's what I did is I did what they call information security. So, and I worked with various classified programs and things and stuff. And in the course of that is I had 2 counterintelligence agents, badge carrying credentials, counterintelligence agents that I would liaison with about once a month, as part of my job. So, I got to know these guys, rather well. And one of the agents just really is fascinated with this stuff. And, the only interest that, U.S. Army counterintelligence showed in this is he wanted me to sign his book. And so, they never, pumped me for information or, kind of surreptitiously said, oh, I'd really like to go out there with you. So there really isn't any interest that I'm aware of, from any kind of governmental agency, because that would have been the perfect, because I'm already on the team, I'm already part of that club, to say, hey, we need you to collect this information for us or feed us this data. And there was none of that.
This might require just a yes or no answer. So during nature of your job, you said 34 years, did you say? Did you ever get any information relating to unexplained phenomena?
The only thing that I had even relating to that, and this was kind of a real subtle thing, is I had another thing I was working with, and I had a counterintelligence agent that would come from another part of the country because this was very compartmentalized what I did. And he would come and, every so often, and we would talk and go look at whatever this was and, make sure everything was still cool with it. And it turns out that he was the protege of General Burt Stubblebine, who was the U.S. Army INSCOM commander that started remote viewing and all of that. And one of the things I did is I was trained outside of the military and outside of the government as a remote viewer. I was trained, as a civilian. We were talking about that stuff because, like I said, he, knew General Stubblebine. And I said, I know officially that, the CIA and the U.S. Army and the other intelligence agencies, said there is not a remote viewing program. And I find that kind of strange since, from an intelligence perspective, it gave enough reliable information enough of the time that it would be reasonable to continue using it as an intelligence source. And I said, I find it kind of strange that, the program was shut down. And I looked at him and he just kind of went.
Yeah.
He just kind of did that.
Yeah.
So, that's about my only brush up against that. It's really strange because I am, one of the few former government guys, and I'm not casting stones here, but I am not in any way, nor was I ever affiliated with any UFO program.
No.
Or any kind of high strangeness. There are government guys out there. I know there's a really well-known British guy that worked for the Ministry of Defense that, I said I was in charge of a UAP program and blah, blah, blah. I was a government guy. I had a top secret clearance with code word stuff after that. And I was not involved in that stuff in any way.
No, thank you.
But that's what you would expect a guy to say that really was involved in it.
I was just about to say that.
Yeah, but no, really, I wasn't involved in any of it.
We believe you. What we're doing, are we having another question, Chris, or we're carrying on?
Yeah, another question, please, Llewellyn. Debbie Shaw, Trey, do you know anything about the folklore local to the Meadow?
Yeah, absolutely. There is a ton of folklore. And going back to Native Americans, the whole, probably about the first 25% or so of my book is talking about the folklore of that area. Is if you go back to the First Nations and Native American people, the Cherokee were very active in this area. And they had several entities that they talked about that were very similar to the Skinwalker, which is a Western United States Native American tradition. There's one very unique one called the Spearfinger Witch. And she would come in and had a finger that was made out of obsidian, and she would touch people and open up their chest cavity and pull their liver out and eat it. And there's another entity called the Soul... escapes my, but basically it was a Cherokee version of the Skinwalker. So very similar. And then you start getting into the folklore of, the 19th century. And there's reports of, ghosts, wild men, which is what they used to call Bigfoot, in the media back in the 19th century. And then you start moving into the 20th century and there's a lot of UFO reports. If you go and look at the BFRO, Bigfoot Reporting Research Organization here in the States, there's a lot of BFRO reports. If you go look at MUFON or the National UFO Reporting Center, there's a lot of UFOs reported in this area. So there's a lot of, just like I talked about, one of the geoconcentrations of high strangeness, going all the way back, to the Native Americans.
Cool. Next question, Loren, please. Do you capture stuff on infrared or thermal that you can't see with normal vision?
Yeah, we capture the portals or the cubes were on thermal. We captured them because of their heat variance. Several years later, our team had gone out and had went out there one morning, and this is also kind of weird. Is the grass on that particular weekend was about 18 inches high, 16, 18 inches high out in the meadow. And they went out there and they found two parallel track lines, like parallel lines, almost like the width of an automobile. And it's like you would expect it to look if an automobile drove through high grass. But this thing started at a very specific point, went a distance, and then stopped. Like something was dropped in, drove, and then was lifted out. So they're like parallel lines. and the grass was bent over, wasn't broken, was bent over. And inside of these track lines, you had like molehills and like little saplings. They were not crushed. So what does that sound like? That sounds like a crop circle, the same kind of phenomena you see with a crop circle. And so I had a team go back out later on that morning, and they had a full spectrum camera that, records infrared and ultraviolet. And they would look through their full spectrum camera standing in this track line, and they saw a cube, off in the distance, maybe about, 90 meters away. They'd step out of the track line, no cube, step back in the track line, cube, step out, no cube. So they could only see the cube as if they were standing in the track line, and only if they were looking through the full spectrum camera. So they decided they were going to start videotaping this cube, and they left the SD card back at camp. There was no way to record. So, it's even seasoned researchers make mistakes sometimes. So the answer to that question is absolutely. There are things that we cannot see with our naked eye that we have used full spectrum cameras to see, and also things that we've used thermal to see.
Absolutely. We're using thermal quite a lot up there at the moment. What about, unless Lorraine's got another question, what about voices? Do you even your name's being called out?
Oh yeah, we disembodied voices all the time. I mean, that's one of the common things I'll tell people is, you'll hear disembodied voices. We've heard laughing, we've heard singing, we've had people's names called out, we've been laughed at. We've had things much like the famous Sierra sounds, the mumblings that sound like almost like a language, crypto language.
They call it the samurai.
The samurai chatter, exactly. We've heard samurai chatter, and like Moorhead, described. And so it's very common out there. And that's one of the things I'll tell people, if you go out there, the three things that you're most likely to experience are shadow people, disembodied voices, and lights in the forest. And team that I had some guests that came out with me in November, they experienced, I don't know if they saw any lights in the forest, but they definitely experienced the disembodied voices. So.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Yeah. Tonya Morrison's asking, have you seen, other than the ones that you caught on your devices, thermal and infrared, have you seen any portals or the Dogman shimmer? I mean, some people even talk about, this is another common thing that's becoming more common, the glimmer man type shimmer type thing. Have you seen anything like that in your team?
I have not. That doesn't mean it hasn't happened, but I just, we haven't observed it out there. So,
Trey, just out of interest, how often are you? I know you sort of vary the time you spend in the region, but how often are you there?
About every 2 to 3 months, we try to go out there, and it's everywhere from 2 days to a week. Other than me, I'm retired, but most of the team have jobs.
Yeah.
And so it varies. But when we go out there, we actually set up a base camp, and we're about half a mile from the Meadow. And what we found is the phenomena is just as likely to happen at base camp, as it is out in the Meadow. Some of the most remarkable shadow man encounters we've had are right there at base camp. So, neat thing is you can sit right there next to the campfire and not even get cold, and research.
Would you ever go alone?
I do sometimes go out there to base camp by myself before the rest of the team members and kind of set things up. I have gone out to the Meadow by myself during the day. We have a protocol that people don't go out, especially at night, by themselves, because we've had, the missing time and other things. It's just for a safety thing.
Yeah.
You can step into, sometimes you can actually step into that Meadow and it feels extremely oppressive. Like you just don't want to be there. It's like, I get this feeling I just need to turn around and go back. So, no, I would not go out to the Meadow by myself. There's too many things that could happen. Even non-high strangeness. It's just not a good idea to go out in the woods by yourself.
Thank you.
One of the other things that Paul and the team up there often, it's another one off the checklist, and this is the missing persons phenomena. Is there anything like that going on in the Meadow or around the Meadow?
I will tell you this. Like I said, there have been bodies found in that vicinity. There was a murder by a cult out there not too long ago within the past few years. Missing persons, I can't really get a good answer on that. I did a Freedom of Information request to the agency that oversees this. And I've sent it both electronically, and then about a month later, I followed it up with a written request. And like David Paulides talks about in his Missing 401 books, there's no reply. They just will not talk to me.
No.
So, I don't know of any. There was a missing persons case. Let's see, that was mid-December. A person went missing. They later found their body. And it was big news. While the person was missing, there were a lot of teams that came out and, searched for this person. A hunter found their body later on in a campsite. And what's really strange is that the body was found. The body was sent to the State Department of Forensic Sciences, to have an autopsy. And it's like there's been a media blackout.
Yeah.
Nobody's reported what their cause of death was. Was it foul play? Was it natural causes? Was it suicide? It's just blank. It's just like it fell into a hole.
Yeah.
The strange thing is, I talked about the cult murder. The cult apparently had a base camp, in this area. And so in my FOIA request, I said, what happened to this base camp? Are cultists still running around out there? Did you clean them out? What happened? No answer.
I was going to say, do you think it's possible that an occult element could be tapping into the phenomena? They could clearly be aware of whatever it is you're aware of.
Oh yeah. I mean, it's, that's common. I mean, all of your areas of, special, energetic significance there in the UK, your cultists, always, focus in on there because it's a special area of, increased energy or whatever.
Just before we move on to the last 30 minutes, I don't know whether Chris wants to talk just briefly, Trey, just to detract away from the Meadow project for a moment. The next sessions, the next live streams that we're doing, are we going to change them, Chris, to Fridays?
Yeah, we're gonna change it to a Friday. I think it's just become apparent that for myself and my wife Lorraine, who's moderating at the moment, and for yourself, Paul, I think we think potentially Friday is going to work better for us. So yeah, we'll give it a try. It's a Friday, and there may well be people out and about. Friday night's a nice night for, you've just finished work, you want to go out for a few beers, but we'll try it out. We'll see how it goes.
Try Friday. Yeah, I'm sorry about that, Trey. I just wanted to. No, it came into my mind. And plus,
I will forget. Yeah.
And plus, for the Truth Proof live stream, we'll be putting a short out on YouTube tomorrow. I think Les said at 7:00, and we've got the Truth Proof live stream as usual on a Thursday, 7 p.m. So back to Trey. Sorry about that, guys.
No problem.
I'm doing it again. Is this book still available?
Yeah. As you know, the publisher of the book has some health issues. Right now, it is out of print.
All right. Okay.
But I have been in discussions this week with another publisher, and he has agreed to take on this book and most likely my second book. And we hope to have it back into print by March. So we're working really hard. It's going to have the same cover. All the IP, intellectual property, was released back to me to include the cover. So it will be out, on Amazon, on ebook, hopefully sooner than later. So we're working very, very hard on that to get that back out there.
So before you get smacked with a few more questions then, Trey, is there anywhere you want to direct people for more information about you?
Yeah, you can basically go to your local gendarme, be it the local constable or Interpol office, and just look for me, because usually I'm an international criminal. I did jaywalk in Canada and in the UK one time. I know, seriously, you can go to Trey Hudson /author on Facebook. That's it's kind of where I hang out most of the time. Also, I have a website, TreyHudsonResearch.com, and that has my biography and some other stuff on there. So that's kind of where I'm at.
Thank you. All right then, Chris.
Trey, have you found yourself in touch, because of the nature of the phenomena, the different types of phenomena in the Meadow? Have you found yourself, like, your network spreading out with like the likes of Skinwalker, Wilson Ranch, and other places?
Yeah, I mean, I've talked to Jeff out at Wilson Ranch. I've like I said, I know Ryan Skinner from both Blind Frog Ranch and Skinwalker Ranch. James Keenan's a friend of mine. Katie Page is a very good friend of mine. She and I actually in September went to the mysterious Colorado Ranch. So I've actually been at the Colorado Ranch. So yeah, it's a really small world. Of course, I know Steve, I know Paul, now Chris, I know you, Philip. So yeah, it's your networking is pretty broad. And what I find is most of us are looking for the same thing.
Absolutely.
And not only are we looking for the same thing, we're experiencing the same thing, which I find very exciting. So, and Paul and I've talked about this, quite a bit is more, actual boots on the ground researchers start communicating. We're going to start coming up with best practices, and start, trying to whittle down some of the stuff that doesn't work and really focus on the, the procedures, tactics, techniques, and procedures that do work. So we can really maximize our time out there on the ground.
Brilliant.
Paul, I was going to bring you in, Paul, and just ask you about, because I know I've been up there a few times a year when we've been making the documentaries and whatever, but you're up there, up at Benton a lot. So I wanted to see if this translates with Trey as well. I just wanted, on occasion, I'd say more often than not, actually, when I've been up there and we've interviewed clairvoyant mediums and things like that, using just a different tactic, really, you do get negative sort of imagery, and she'll report negative feelings, and sometimes there's a very ominous feeling up there.
Yeah.
I just wondered if you had any inclinations as to why that is. Have you been able to?
Well, for myself, I've got to admit, and I know Trey, he's not kind of allured to that, because you've said like it can be negative. You can have great experiences up there. Mm-hmm. For the most part, I've got to admit that a lot of the time it's negative in that area, and I don't think we go into the area with a negative attitude. I mean, if you came in, you're probably the same. I mean, you want to do serious research, but as a collective, when you know people that you're with, it doesn't stop you laughing. It doesn't stop you enjoying yourself, if you know what I mean. We're not stood drinking beer or smoking something we shouldn't be smoking. We go in there serious, but we still have a laugh. We're still good-natured, good-humored. And for the most part, this location throws out a lot of negative. And so it'd be, I don't know, if there were a ratio out of 100, what would you think? Is that a difficult one to ask, Trey? What would you think where you are?
Probably about 50-50.
Really?
Yeah, it's, sometimes we'll go out there and it feels kind of oppressive. Sometimes it goes out there and we feel like it's going to be very productive. And other times we go out there, it's completely neutral.
Yeah.
But, you mentioned, some of the very negative stuff. I think Chris mentioned it. We do something called the Estes protocol that we've brought from the paranormal world over into us. That's where a person takes a ghost box, set of earbuds. We put shooting muffs over their ears and a blindfold so they can't hear anything other than what's coming out of the ghost box. And the protocol is, whatever you hear come out of the ghost box, you just repeat it out loud. If you hear rutabaga, you just say rutabaga, or, bangers and mash, and you just say bangers and mash, whatever you hear. And the person is completely isolated from the individual asking the questions. And I know we did a session one time, and this is the one where we actually had the shadow people surrounding the cinematographer that he could see with his naked eye and also caught on camera. Is the individual that was going through the Estes session, I was asking the questions, and he kept getting a lot of really dark imagery. And it started off like with Nephilim, which, a lot of people believe that the Nephilim were another type of, word for large men or Bigfoot. And then he started getting like a lot of almost apocalyptic visions. He said, I'm hearing this stuff, but he goes, I'm also seeing this stuff. So it touched on a very interesting part of his brain where it was a very negative experience. Now, it wasn't something that scared him, but the imagery was very apocalyptic, blood, battles, dead babies, things like that. And so, sometimes you do get a very oppressive, negative energy, while you're doing this stuff. And once again, I warned people earlier, you really got to be in a good place psychologically, and dare I say spiritually, when you get into this stuff.
Excellent. Thank
you.
you.
Trey, do you think, I mean, you've obviously, like myself and Paul, you're probably all you do. Well, I don't know whether it's all you do, but a lot of the time your mind's just turning over, wondering about, you know, what is the phenomena? Is it one phenomena? Is it multiple types of phenomena? Have you given that much thought of it? I mean, you can't come to a conclusion with this, as we discussed earlier.
Yeah, I think it's I think this is a hypothesis. I think in this area there is something about it that is of interest to the others, whatever that is. It's a multidimensional entity or entities. And whatever their business is, I don't know. I probably couldn't even comprehend it. It would be like an ant trying to comprehend a Swiss wristwatch. You know, it's just beyond, what we can comprehend. I think sometimes it wants to communicate with us, and sometimes I think it manifests in different ways. Sometimes we've had physical touches, people physically being touched. We've had disembodied voices. We've had, missing time. We've had the cubes of the portals. I think it's all part of the same phenomena. I just think it's different manifestations. Like if you look at me, I'm, a brother, a father, a husband, and a man, but I'm all of those at once. So it just depends on, what part of me you're interacting with that persona comes across. And I think it's, it's not any different with these other entities. It's like, what aspect of their nature are you encountering at that time? And then with our, simple three-dimensional brains, we're like, oh, well, that's a Bigfoot. We're encountering a Bigfoot. And we're encountering an alien. And maybe they're all the same, different aspects of the same being.
So maybe it's phenomenon, as in singular, just giving us what we want at any given time. Then, possibly, we, like you said, we're all
theory.
kind of hypothesizing, aren't we? We don't know, do we? But it's worth throwing these things out there, isn't it? You touched on shadow people, and everything. I sound like I'm going, we've got that up there. You touched, do you know what I mean? But what we are seeing things like that up there, and not just Paul. All of us, and sometimes as a collective, as in 2 or 3 people at the same time, all erupting, saying, "Did you see that?"
Right.
Do you know? And I don't mean hysterically, but do you know what I'm? You know where I'm coming from.
I know exactly.
You probably know Philip Kinsella, and Philip was up there, and my eldest daughter were up there, and they both saw it at the same time, and did you see it walk across? And it's just the shape of a. It's got legs, it's got arms. I wouldn't say it's a woman, a man. It's just a shadow of something walking past. And how often are you encountering that?
Yeah, it's pretty common. It's kind of funny. I was kind of laughing about you. When you were explaining, your y'all's experiences with that. Is we'll take somebody new out there, and we'll be kind of debriefing when we come back, and it's like, well, I saw a shadow people at the edge of it, and somebody that is kind of new to the group will say, I saw that too, but I didn't say anything because I thought I was imagining it. And then everybody's like, well, I saw it. Yeah. It was over there in the corner next to the stump. And it turns out that everybody was seeing this, but like I said before, we have this normalcy box and we like to put things in. It's like, oh, I saw a shadow person. It must be a trick of light, or I must be imagining it, as my eyes are trying to adjust to the darkness. When in fact, you have other people that are seeing the exact same thing that are jumping inside of their own boxes and saying, oh, no, nobody else sees this. I'm imagining it.
What we try to do, Trey, and I don't mean we do it every time, because as you know, and Chris and lots of other people in chat, people say, why don't you take a picture of it if you see a strange light or UFO? You're that busy trying to rationalize and put it into a box that fits conventional, that you don't do it. But what we do try and do is, we hopefully, when we do see something, we bring it up right away. Because we're hoping as a collective people are seeing it rather. I don't mean that they're imagining it afterwards, but it's always good if a few people corroborate at the same time. Kind of thing. As well, know this, and so does Chris.
Yeah.
And but the shadow beings, I can't get my head around what these things are. Is it a projection of? It's obviously a projection of the unexplained, the unknown others. But are they actually beings? It's just really. I don't know. It kind of twists my mind. Absolutely.
And the shadow people, and you hear some people talk about the Hat Man, and all of these phenomena are ancient. The incubus, the succubus, and all of that. It's a very ancient phenomena. So it's definitely something that's ingrained in the human consciousness. It's something that culturally, across many cultures, people have been dealing with these. And here we are, in the 21st century in myriad locations, on different continents in different parts of the world, still experiencing it. So
incubus, succubus. I mean, how many people, like you said, we're in 21st century, so we're supposed to be moved away from
right.
the way we thought, the way we acted hundreds of years ago, yet people still report the same thing as in incubus, succubus.
Yes.
That's not changed really, has it?
No. I mean, it's, for all of our, fanciness. Now, we're so advanced, we're so cultured, we have the scientific revolution, we're beyond all of that. But every time you think that you're above, folkloric happenings, one of them comes up behind you and bitch slaps you, when you're not expecting it. And it's like, wow, I've got to consider the little people again, or I've got to consider fairy lights again, because as much as I like to think I'm an educated, grounded 21st century guy, there it is. There it is. I've got to address it.
Yeah. Okay.
Trey, I mean, with everything going on with disclosure at the moment, I'm reluctant to use the word really disclosure, but for want of a better one. Do you think they have a better understanding about what this phenomena is, the powers that be, the black aerospace groups and people like, the guy that used to own Skinwalker called
Bigelow.
Oh, Bigelow.
Yeah, people like Bigelow, do you think they have a better understanding of the phenomena?
This is just my theory. I've never been read into any of this stuff. So, I'm not one of these guys that say, well, I heard about this special program. The stuff I was involved, I didn't hear about any of that. But I'm trying to think how I can word this. The people that have come forward, especially from the U.S. Department of Defense, and I can't speak to the MOD or any of that. I'm a American guy, so I can address the DOD. Is the guys that have come forward from that world, the way they present themselves and the way they go about saying what they say rings true to me. Not that what they're saying rings true, but the way they go about protecting themselves and the avenues they go through to further their disclosure rings true to me. It's how I would do it if I came across some information, the protections I would put in place to, save my bacon and, not violate my non-disclosure oath. So it rings true. It sounds plausible. Now, I do know that if there were UAPs or extraterrestrial craft or non-human intelligences that the government, especially what we call the Five Eyes, which are the UK, the US, Canada, Australia, and New Zealand, the Big Five, encountered this, then they might be reluctant to disclose it because the way they encountered this stuff or the way they detected this stuff might reveal methods and sources. We detected a craft moving at blah, 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 blah. Well, how did you know that? Well, we're not going to disclose that we had a geosynchronous satellite sitting over watching this part of the world because there was something interesting going on in that part of the world.
Yeah.
We don't want to let anybody know that we have that capability. So by not disclosing the sighting of a craft, we're not disclosing that we had that satellite on station for that particular moment in time. And so, what I hope to do, and I put the word out there, is to talk to some of our folks in Congress. And the way the U.S. secrecy world works is you have people that are called original classifications authorities or program managers in the special access world. And they determine with their program security officers on what is classified and what isn't. And here in the U.S., we have a very bad habit of just because it was classified yesterday, I don't go through a thorough review and declassify what should be declassified. I just take the path of least resistance because everybody's overworked, at least in this world. And what I would like to happen is see the people in these special programs that have visibility on this stuff, everybody sit down together with a cadre of security specialists, like what I did, and actually go over and say, okay, what can we actually declassify and not risk national security? Let's really put the effort into this because the public has a right to know. And I think if somebody really took the time, took the effort, and really thought about this, I think there's a lot of stuff out there that can be declassified, and I think it would absolutely blow our minds. I'm hoping that we're right on the edge of that happening. I've heard some rumblings coming from DOD that there are some people kind of looking at it from that perspective. I hope to get in front of some of our Congress people and lay that out, and set up talk about setting up a special committee under the auspice of what we call the Information Security Oversight Office in the DoD to start releasing some of this stuff. So I'm cautiously optimistic. There's been stuff that has come out, especially like with the Go Fast gimbal, Tic Tac videos, from DoD that I never thought I'd see in my lifetime. So I'm cautiously optimistic.
Thank you, Chris. What about questions?
Yeah, we better get to some questions.
15 minutes left, Trey. If you're okay with you.
Say again.
You okay with questions? Yeah.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
Yes. Mike the Disabled Welshman. Hi, Trey. Have you ever seen or heard anything that has scared you?
Not scared me. I've heard and see things that maybe makes me a bit nervous, maybe a bit apprehensive, but I'm not a scaredy kind of guy. I just, it's just not the kind of person I am. I have been in areas where it's like, I have a feeling that maybe we shouldn't go there, that is an area we shouldn't step into. But as far as absolutely being, scared, running around, screaming, no, that's just, nobody on my team's like that, because, they come from professions where they're used to high stress situations, and they can stay on task, they can stay on mission, and focus on what they're doing and not get unnerved by what's going on around them.
Yeah.
Cool.
Steve-O, Trey, would you like to visit the UK and investigate areas like Bempton or Rendlesham Forest? Perhaps?
Absolutely. Almost had an opportunity back last September that fell through. And so, yes.
We're looking forward to it. We were going to be speaking at the same venue.
Yeah, it was going to be great. And I'm hoping that, something like that actually materializes in the future as, things kind of get settled down, where that fell apart, that structure's built back up, and maybe we can have something like that in the future. But absolutely, I'd love to visit the UK. It's been a while since I've been to the UK. Always had a good time there. Somebody can buy me a pint, I'll be a happy guy.
Yeah, sounds like a plan.
Dragonborn, what and where from does Trey think Bigfoot? Where does Trey think Bigfoot and Dogman are, or what does he think they are?
Bigfoot and possibly Dogman. I don't have a lot of experience encountering Dogman. Bigfoot, maybe a little bit more. Is especially in the research we've done, and I've watched other videos from other people, especially using thermal cameras, thermal imagery, is we'll see these hominids, these cryptic creatures that are colder than the ambient temperature around them. Now that flies in the face of common sense. They should be warmer, And my team was at another site, and they filmed a cryptid behind some bushes kind of doing this, but it was colder than the ambient temperature around it. It was during the wintertime. And I've seen other videos like that, to include some of our videos that we've done there at the Meadow. So it makes me wonder if maybe what we call Bigfoot isn't some kind of multidimensional or interdimensional being that will move in and out of existence.
Yeah.
And you can just, you can catch it sometimes, when it's very obvious, like in the, the Gimlin-Patterson film, or like in some of our films, you'll catch it when it's just winking in and out of existence. And that would explain why some people, researchers say they'll find a track line where you'll have Bigfoot tracks just start, walk a distance, and then just stop. Something materialized, walked a distance, and then stop. I've also seen footage of a creature on thermal running behind a tree and never comes out the other side. Yeah. Just vanishes. So I think there's a possibility they're multidimensional. Human beings are multidimensional creatures. That's why we can do things like remote viewing. So why would we say maybe Bigfoot's not multidimensional?
Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah.
Well, and then Lorraine, yep, excellent.
Does the Meadow have high recorded traces of infrasound? That's a good question, actually.
Not that I'm aware of. We haven't had anybody get the infrasound zapping, like sometimes you hear about. That doesn't mean it won't happen in the future, but we haven't experienced it there.
That's interesting, and I don't want to break into a question here. Just keep this brief. Do you think now, by talking about that might happen when you go? It's strange.
Well, maybe so. They might. We might go out there, here in a few months, and you'll find me, quivering on the ground, peeing on myself, and
try not to do that, but just let us know if anything like that happens.
Yeah.
Is there another question, please, Lorraine? Excellent.
In your opinion, what part does consciousness play in all of this?
That's key. That's absolutely key. Is we limit ourselves as human beings. every single friggin' day we limit ourselves. And the more we open our mind up, and especially if we're using techniques like guided meditation, if we're using technology like the Corin or God helmet, or we're using, training like a remote viewing, is I believe once you train your mind to become open and more aware of these things going on around you, you are going to start having more experiences. Not that they're necessarily just happening, but now you're noticing them. Now you're equipped to maybe receive that signal where you weren't equipped to receive it before.
Thank you.
That's a good point. Rivington Pike Beast Lee Roscoe, what does Trey think about the Sierra sounds and the animals that made it?
Yeah, Ron Moorhead out there in California. We have heard the samurai chatter ourselves at the Meadow. I think that it is reasonable that these beings, I'm not even going to say creatures, these beings have a language. And I think at certain times we can hear that language. Other times they're communicating and maybe we can't, because of maybe they're speaking in a frequency that we can't pick up with our ears. But no, I think the Sierra sounds are absolutely authentic. We've heard the samurai chatter at our location, and I think more people that get out in the woods, they'll hear it at more locations, more sites.
Mike, the Disabled Welshman, Trey, what is your opinion of black-eyed kids, and have you ever encountered any?
Yeah, sometimes the kids, will wander in our campsite like Boy Scouts. We smack them and give them a black eye and send them on their way. No. That's not the kind of black-eyed kids I'm talking about. We've never encountered, any of the black-eyed kids. Now I know that's a very common folklore, especially here in the States. But no, we've never encountered anything like that, other than the ones we beat up. But not folks. I'm kidding. I'm not beating up children. I'm kidding. Don't report me.
I think we can take a joke. Our listeners can take a joke. Trey, we're good. Yeah, right. Have we done with questions? No, Lenny. Yeah,
Trey, asking will you ever come to Benton?
Yeah. I mean, if I can, ever get out there, like anything else, I'm already scheduled. Let's see, to do Spain, Italy. Am I doing Portugal? Malta and Croatia later on this year. So
really?
my overseas budget is about spent. So I would love to come out there. I know Paul and I have talked about it, and I just
it'd be great actually. But it'll happen. It'll happen.
Yeah.
I think that's it for questions.
Okay.
Thank you. I just want to thank Lee Roscoe for his super chat again, mate. He's a great fan of the show, Lee, and he's always supporting us, and we really appreciate you guys that have tuned in tonight. It's been a great show. Trey's been I knew it'd be a good show. And with this subject, it's a weird one, because these conversations can go on for hours and hours, because what we've got to do is we've got to branch out into all the different areas. But Paul and I have found that if you could just choose one element of this phenomenon, and you could have a whole show about it. I mean, what I wanted to ask you about, Trey, was the God helmet, and how would we go about getting hold of one?
And I don't know if they're still selling them there. You could go to I think the website was godhelmet.com, and it was a student of Dr. Persinger that started manufacturing an updated version of it. Now, luckily, the one that you can get now is very small, and it runs off a laptop. And if you have an external power source, 110, like here in the States, 110 volt power source, you can actually take it out in the field. And that's what we do, is we take it out, and we pull it out at base camp, which has no power, and we'll put people through this protocol. And our belief is it primes the pump. It's like I might do a God helmet session, but that will help other people, have experiences, because it primes the pump for high strangeness. So if you godhelmet.com, or just Google God helmet, you get a lot more information. Dr. Persinger did a lot of research. There's a lot of academic stuff out there, but I believe there's definitely something to it, and we've had some pretty good results.
Thank you.
I think would you be open to giving that a go, Paul?
I think so. Yeah, and I think that's the thing. We've got to be open to try anything, and not be closing ourselves down. So I think, you're saying that you're getting results with it. So why not? I think it'd be a great idea. It'd be something to look into. Yeah, absolutely. As would the meditation, because I've got to admit, I'm not going to pretend that I go up there and I meditate. I don't. Dr. Martin Abbas has been in chat tonight, I think. Well, he was in, because I saw somebody mentioning his name, and Martin's a good friend of mine, and he's keen on meditation, and I've done some meditation sessions with Martin, and I saw an inverted pyramid, funnily enough, and when I talked about it afterwards, he said that's what he'd seen, which I found fascinating, because meditation is not my thing. So I think basically what I'm saying is we've got to be open to try anything.
Yeah.
Try and get results.
And that's why we brought up a psychoanalyst, psychotherapist onto our team, that has that perspective and is trained, to kind of help us in that journey.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we've only got 5 minutes to go, because I know that there were another aspect. Sorry, did you have another question, Chris?
No. I was just going to read Steve-O's question. It's okay.
Yeah, do that then, because the audience is key. They're the people that we're here for.
Well, I think we know the answer to this, Trey, but do you think you've got close on an answer on any of the paranormal?
No. Not only do I not have the answers, I don't even really know what the right questions are. It's this stuff. Anybody that tells you they have the answer is either lying or they're a fool, because we just don't know. I mean, this is so outside of our experiences as human beings that we can hypothesize, we can guess, we can theorize, but nobody has the the full answer. So that's kind of the fun of it. It's kind of like putting together a puzzle. You never know what piece you'll pull out of the box.
Absolutely. Thank you. Do you know, we're going to have you back on here, and I don't want to close it down just this moment. And just if Chris has got just a couple of minutes, because you might not want to touch on this very much, but you did say that just when you're experiencing one type of phenomena, then something else comes along that just sort of kicks the ball in another direction.
Right.
Briefly, because we're just about up for time. The face changes.
Oh yeah, that's something that it's we've been experiencing here the last few times we've been out. Is a team member will look at another team member or a guest, and their face will change. It will actually manifest into something else. And we had an experience where we had a female guest come back, and a team member said that her face looked like a witch, like an old crone, And this was an attractive woman. I mean, she obviously was not an old crone. And he went to bed, and strangely enough, we did an SD session, and one of the words that came out of the SD session was witch. And these things were totally independent. I didn't even know he had seen this this face change until like 2 weeks later.
Yeah.
And then we were in November with some more guests, and one of the guests looked at another guest and said, "Why are you so sad? Why is your face so sad?" And he said when he said that, he saw the guy's face change back into a normal face. He said it was like it morphed into like a sad, very morose looking face. And I have no idea what that means. And then talking to my other team members, one of them said, "Well, you remember when I told you that, we had a guest come in, and I looked at this guest and I could see right through them and looked in their face, and they were, maybe something other than what they were." And I said, "Yeah, I thought you were talking about allegorically." And he goes, "No, I meant literally." I said, "Holy crap, I didn't even think about that." So this is 3 times this thing has happened. I have no idea what it means.
It's fascinating.
Yeah.
I just wanted to bring it up because I'd be interested now. They said be careful what you wish for, but it's just strange when you talk about these things, you evoke them. I'd be interested now if this. We'll not say anything to certain people who come up to our area, but if this happens, well, I'll be letting you know. I'll be.
Please.
Interesting, yeah. Okay. I think,
absolutely.
What about rounded up? Oh, sorry,
Trey, you mentioned just briefly, just before we go, you mentioned that you'd been featured in a documentary recently. What's the name of that documentary?
Yeah, the name of that documentary is Cryptic Encounters: The Land Between the Lakes, and it's done by Relic Films, and you can look it up on Patreon. But about the first 1/3, 30 minutes of it is a film team comes out and kind of wants to touch base on high strangeness as they're preparing to go out into the land between the lakes, here in the U.S. So they had their own experiences, and it's all captured on film, like just crazy equipment failures, crazy SD session, just a lot of really good stuff. So that's out there. So if anybody wants to watch it, it's, like I said, just go to Patreon and type in Now my mind just went completely blank.
Cryptid
Relic
encounters,
films.
Land Between the Lakes. Cryptid
Relic
encounters,
films.
Yeah.
Yeah, so
Relic films. Excellent.
Relic films.
Brilliant. Well, thanks a lot, Trey. I've really enjoyed it.
Thank you.
And I'm sure Paul
Well,
has
thank
too.
you, gentlemen.
Absolutely.
I hope everybody's enjoyed tonight's stream. So don't forget, guys, we will see you next Friday. So, next week, we're not going to be here Tuesday. We're going to give Friday a go. Up to now, we don't have a guest planned, but that's not to say we won't have one planned. If not, I'm sure Paul and I, you can listen to Paul and I waffle on for another 2 hours. There's always plenty to talk about.
Absolutely. And we want Trey back at some point in the future.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, well, yeah, we need to, and hopefully, like Trey said, let's try and get Trey over here anyway. And,
absolutely.
I'm sure everybody would love to see him lecture live as well. So thanks a lot, guys. And we'll see you next week.
Yeah, thank you. Bye-bye.